Welcome to On My Way to Wealth, the podcast where busy Gen Xers can learn financial tips as they navigate life on their way to wealth. And now, please join your host, Luis Rosa.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of On My Way to Wealth. My name is Luis Rosa, and I'm your host. I hope everyone is happy, healthy, safe, and I know that a lot of states or most states have already reopened at least phase one, so be safe out there as you head back out into the world. I want to talk to you today about debt consolidation, debt elimination, refinancing, etc. Some of you that may have credit card debt out there are wondering how the best way to pay these things off are. So, several options. One option is to continue to doing what you're doing. But how do you know that that is the best option if you don't compare it to something else? So I'm going to give you some tips that you can do, as well as some tools you can use to analyze and compare what you're doing versus another option and see if, in fact, what you're doing is better, which it could be. But at least you'll know and you'll make an informed decision. So the first thing is debt consolidation. Some of you have several credit cards, for example, and you're thinking, well, what if I just consolidate all of those things into one loan? So that's the way it works typically. Let's say you owe $15,000 spread over 3 credit cards. You can contact a lender. You can do it online right now. You don't have to go to a bank or anything, although you could. And then get a brand new loan for $15,000, pay off the 3 credit cards that you owe, and consolidate them into one new loan. And typically that saves you money because if you're getting a lower interest rate, or sometimes you might be spreading out the term of that loan over a long period of time. So that might lower your payment, but just be careful because sometimes when you consolidate, if you extend the term too long, yes, it might lower your monthly payment, but overall you might end up paying more interest than doing what you were doing before. So if the goal is to pay the debt off sooner and save money on interest, be careful when you do a debt consolidation, depending on how long you spread out that term. So that's something you want to consider. So in my example, say you have 3 credit cards, you owe $15,000, your average rate might be, say, 14%. You might find an online lender that says, hey, we'll give you a 3 to 5 year loan at 8% for the same amount of money you owe. You will just take those 3 and basically consolidate them into one loan. And now you have a fixed monthly payment at a fixed rate for a fixed amount of time. And you know that you'll be done with that debt, say, in 36 months if you choose a 3-year option, which is great because now it gives you peace of mind. It gives you that knowledge that you'll have the one payment for 36 months and then you're done. Now, here are some downsides to that. Number one, you're going to open up brand new credit. Typically, when you get new credit and they run your credit report, it's considered a hard inquiry on your credit report. Now, if you do this just one time for a loan, it's not a big deal. But typically, a lot of us, when we're doing this, we'll probably end up shopping around and we have several hard inquiries on our credit report. So you want to keep that in mind. Number two, if you decide to go with that option, when you open up that brand new loan, it's going to be considered a new debt on your credit report, brand new. And let's say my example is $15,000. It's going to show us loan amount $15,000, loan balance $15,000. So now you went from having 3 credit cards that you owe $15,000 on. However, maybe you weren't maxed out from your credit. Maybe your overall credit might have been, say, 25 grand overall. So you didn't owe the full balance on all of those cards, but now you do on the brand new loan. So you have a hard inquiry and you also have a brand new loan that is maxed out immediately. So that could potentially negatively impact your credit report. So keep that in mind in case you are trying to do something else, like purchase a home or something that's going to require your credit in the short term. But overall, yes, it might save you money because you might get a lower interest rate and it might lower your payment as well, depending on what kind of term you choose. Just keep in mind that if you extend the term too long, do the math and multiply the amount of payments by the amount of the dollar value of the payment by the amount of months and see if you are in fact going to be saving money in interest. And also be aware that some of these lenders charge you an initial fee to set the loan up. So you got to factor that in to see if it makes sense. So that's debt consolidation. Now, here's the other downside to debt consolidation. If you're not disciplined enough, a lot of these debt consolidation companies don't necessarily require that you close the accounts that you're paying off, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because when you look at your credit, you want to make sure that you have a certain history in your credit report. So it's fine. Yeah, if you have credit cards that you've had for several years, you might not want to close those. You can pay them off, but then keep them open, especially if they're major credit cards that you've had for a long time. And then what I always recommend my clients do is charge something on those cards every month, like, a recurring subscription for your cell phone or something like that, and then pay it off in full before the end of the grace period. So you're not stuck paying interest, but you are still being credited for that history and also for the activity on the account. Because what happens is, a lot of the times when you consolidate, whether or not you're required by the company that you use the loan consolidation through, a lot of people just close those accounts down. And that ends up combined with everything. Think about this. You have a brand new loan. So you have a hard inquiry in your credit report, new debt, maxed out, and then you go ahead and you close all the accounts you just finished paying off. Your credit report's probably going to take a hit based on that. So you want to be strategic about it. Now, here's the problem that I see a lot of people end up with is when they consolidate credit cards, they pay off the balances on the old cards, they have the new payment, but old habits have a way of creeping back in. And little by little, I've seen people where they end up charging the cards again that they just finished paying off. And then you end up in a worse position because now you have the new loan plus balances on the credit cards that you paid off. So you want to be mindful of that. Typically, you want to do a budget first to make sure that you can afford this new loan. Make sure that you are, in fact, optimizing your budget, because there's a lot of stuff that you might be able to get rid of without necessarily sacrificing a lot of your lifestyle. And I'll tell you a little bit about that in a second. But just be mindful of that. So that is debt consolidation. Now, what about if you want to do a strategy where you pay off the debt without borrowing anything new? And here are the two most common strategies. One is called the snowball method. The other one is called the avalanche method. And here's how they work. With the snowball method, you take all of your creditors. So what I recommend is you sit down, write the name of each creditor, the minimum payment, the balance, and the APR, and do this for each single creditor. Now, what you want to do is with the snowball method, you're going to send the minimum payment to every single creditor except one. So before you even do that, you sit down first, do your budget, figure out how much extra above and beyond the combined minimums you can send to your creditors. So let's say you figure out, okay, you know what? I can do $200 a month extra above and beyond my minimums. So you list your creditors, name, minimum payment, APR, balance. Now, what you do with the snowball method, and I'm going to give you a website that you can go to as well. It's called powerpay.org, and I'll put it in the reference. Very great tool to analyze this for free. You go in, you list your creditors. Now what you do is you can compare what you're currently doing. A lot of us that have extra money to send to our creditors typically don't want to pay the minimum payment, right? So we send a couple of extra dollars to each creditor, because we all know when you get that credit card statement and they show you if you pay the minimum payment, a lot of the times you're just not going to pay that until like over 2 decades later. So naturally, we want to get rid of that and send extra payments. But the snowball method has been mathematically proven to be more effective if you pay the minimum payment to each creditor, and then the card with the lower balance, you send its minimum payment plus the additional dollars that you can send. So when you determine that you can send an extra $200 a month, you send the minimum to everything. Let's say the smaller balance card was $50. That one is going to get $250. And then you're going to go through a series of payments following your calendar, which you can generate on powerpay.org. And once that little card is paid, then now you have that $250 plus the minimum on the next card. And that's going to go to the next card. And then it snowballs in your favor. Think of it kind of like compound interest, but working in your favor. Compound interest is your enemy when you owe money, because an $80 sweater might cost you $120 if you charge it and you carry that balance for a while. Now, the snowball method is not the best method. It's probably better than you just sending a little extra to each card, but it's effective because psychologically you get a win right away. And what I mean by that is, if you have several credit cards and you have a small little store card that has a $280 balance and you're sending the minimum plus an extra 200, you're probably going to pay it off within the first month or two. And that feels good. And then you say, you know what? One down, three to go. And then you get motivated and you just keep doing that for the next card and next card and the next card. So the avalanche method is the same exact concept where you list all your creditors, but instead of sending the additional payment to the one with the smaller balance, you're going to send it to the one with the highest interest rate. And mathematically, this is in fact the best method because you are going to pay the debts off sooner and you're going to save more money in interest. The problem that some people have with this is that a lot of the times the credit cards with the higher balance are also the ones with the higher interest rate. So in my scenario, you might have a credit card with like a $14,000 balance and a 22% interest rate. And you might have a little store card with like $280 on it at 8% or 10%. So you're going to send the minimum to that one and send the largest amount of money you can to the one with the highest interest rate. So you will not be paying off the lower interest credit card right away. So you don't feel the quote unquote win right away. So what I usually do with my clients is I compare the snowball method and the avalanche method and then say, look, this is how much more you save by doing avalanche. And depending on the person and everything, sometimes a lot of people choose the snowball if it's not too much of a difference. If it's an extra month, for example, they might just want to go with the snowball. There's nothing wrong with getting that win, right? Whatever it takes for you to motivate it. So at powerpay.org, you can compare consolidating, you can compare snowball, you can compare avalanche, and you can compare it to what you're doing now. And it's a really powerful tool for you to get out of debt sooner. So I highly recommend that you use it. I was talking about compound interest. It is said that Albert Einstein said that compound interest was like one of the greatest forces in the universe. I don't know if he actually said that or not, but compound interest is indeed quite the force, because if you have $100 and you get 10% return on that, you just made $10, and now that $100 is $110. And if you get 10% on it again, you're going to get interest on top of interest. That's $11. Well, that's the same thing that happens against you when you borrow money and you have it on a credit card. So compound interest can be your friend if you're an investor and a saver. Compound interest is definitely your enemy if you owe money. So something to keep in mind. So before you even think about consolidating, you should go and do your budget first, because there are ways for you to figure out if there is some extra stuff that you can cut back on. And I want to point out that a lot of the times when you can cut back on stuff doesn't mean that you need to sacrifice. My wife and I just recently sat down last weekend and we went over every single bill that we had, like utilities and stuff like that, just to see if there was anything that we can cut back on. And, we actually found a couple of $100 without having to sacrifice any of our budget. And I'll give you an example, a couple of examples of what we found. One thing was I've been paying, it was like $15 a month for the rental of my router with my cable provider. And I've been with the same company for 4 years. So I've been paying $180 a year for 4 years. I bought that router over and over again, and yet I still don't own it because it belongs to the company. And I said, wow, that's insane. So I just thought about, well, what if I bought my own router? So I went online, I found a router that was approved by my company. I spent like $110 on it. I got it a few days later, called the company, hooked it up, and now I disabled their router, enabled mine, and I no longer have to pay that $15 a month. Now, that's very little, right? But I did that several times with other things. I looked at our phone bill. We've been working from home under quarantine for several months now. I literally have spent zero data for the past 2 months. So I lowered my plan, and I can always go back, right? Another thing I found is I had to purchase insurance on my phone with the carrier, my cell phone plan provider, and also with the manufacturer of my phone. So I actually had 2 separate insurance policies on my phone. So I was able to cut one off. That was another $22. Going back to my cable company, I found that I had the alarm system with them as well. And it was the same concept as the router. I was paying $45 a month to rent this equipment. So I found an online company that sells you the equipment. I spent about $300. I bought a camera, several monitors, the keypad, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And I own my equipment now. And my payment is now $25 instead of $45. Now, obviously, it's going to take some time for me to make my money back with these savings, but ultimately, I will be saving that money because I own my own equipment and I no longer have a subscription. So I don't have to worry about contracts. And I found a lot of money to save. Now, the biggest one was refinancing my wife's student loans. She has some private student loans that was paying, one was over 12%, the other one's almost 8%. She went online, one of these famous consolidation companies, and she was able to get 5.28% on her loans. Now, we took advantage of the opportunity because now the interest rate is significantly lower, which means that the payment's significantly lower. But what we're doing is we're taking the added savings now and just continuing to pay the old amount to the loan. And all that means is now instead of paying 12 and 7 point something percent, we're paying 5.28, which means that we're going to pay that loan off a lot sooner with the same exact payment that we were making. So when I say see what you can cut back on, don't immediately think that there are things that are going to cause you to feel like you're missing out. Because a lot of the times, people relate the word budget to like the word diet and sacrifice. Doesn't necessarily mean that there's a lot of things out there that you could just simply save money. And then the final thing we did is I called my insurance carrier for my homeowners, auto, and umbrella policy. I noticed that a lot of all those major carriers out there, the insurance companies, were giving premiums back because people have been working from home. My particular carrier was not doing that. And I was like, well, that's unacceptable. And I just switched to a new carrier. And guess what? I ended up saving almost $1,000 per year on my insurance without sacrificing any of the coverages. In fact, I was able to double my umbrella coverage from 1 million to 2 million. So I ended up saving money and increasing my coverage. And now overall, my monthly payments are lower on all those things I did. Now, was it fun? Absolutely not. I did not have a good time having to call insurance companies. And, it's definitely not fun, especially when you're trying to cancel something, they try to give you that sales pitch so that you can stay on. Well, let me transfer you to the customer loyalty department. Like, I don't need that. You should have thought about that sooner. So anyway, do that first. Once you figure out if you can cut some money from your budget and how much more extra you can send to your creditors, then go and get a quote for a debt consolidation offer. So that way you have an idea of the terms that you're being offered, meaning your interest rate and the years, right? So you'll know the payment. You go to powerpay.org, create a username and password. It's free. You enter the debt consolidation information there. It's very user-friendly. You enter the information of what you're doing currently, and then you can run scenarios and say, what if I did highest interest rate first? What if I did lowest balance first? What if I want it timed? So you can say, you know what? I want to be out of debt by X date. And what would I need to pay to get out of debt by X date? It gives you all those reports. And a lot of you, if you listen to my previous episode on SMART goals, that's one of the things you want to do with your goals. You want to have a timeline on it. So definitely, if you have not done so, be sure to listen to the previous episode. So that is all I got today. Definitely reach out to me if you have any questions, Luis at onmywaytowealth.com. If you have any questions or any suggestions, any future topics you'd like me to speak on, send me an email. Anybody that you think would be a great person for me to interview, or if you yourself listening think you'd be a great asset to my audience, feel free to reach out, Luis at onmywaytowealth.com. Thank you and stay well. Thank you for listening to On My Way to Wealth. If you have any questions, please send me an email at luis at onmywaytowealth.com. The information provided here is for information and education purposes only. The opinions expressed herein are solely those of myself, unless otherwise specifically cited. Material presented is believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations are made by my firm or myself about other parties' information or accuracy or completeness. All information or ideas provided should be discussed in detail with a financial advisor, accountant, or legal counsel prior to implementation. Thank you.